Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. Today we're just going to give another 30 seconds and try to, while everyone gets in and gets settled, and then we'll get started. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. The slide deck can be found in the handout section on your webinar toolbar. Please use the question section on the right-hand side to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll be holding all questions for the end. We understand that we may not be able to cover them all during the Q&A session, so we appreciate your patience. We will also be sharing the slides and the presentation video recording link following the live presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to our presenters today, Marcy Taylor and Bill Sansone.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to participate in this webinar. We're excited to talk to you and talk to you about what's coming up in 2022 in terms of law firm strategy. I'm Marcy Taylor. I'm a principal in the law firm advisory team at Witham. I've been working on the management side of the law for a little over 20 years after starting out as a practicing attorney, both consulting and in-house in law firms, and pleased to be part of Witham's law firm advisory team.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Sansone. I've been with the firm about 16 years. I'm the practice leader for the law advisory group, and I also was the practice leader for the law firm niche in the firm. And we thank you very much for attending this, and hopefully you'll find some valuable information here. So go ahead, Marcy.
Great, thanks, Bill. So these are our objectives for today. We're going to do a quick overview and summary, just the 30,000-foot level of the strategic issues facing law firms this year. There are quite a few. Then we're going to go through in some detail the results of our law firm leadership survey that we conducted in the fall. As Alex said, we've reserved some time for discussion and Q&A, but we're happy to, we know we're going to go over a lot of data, so we're happy to answer any questions that you have. So if you'd like to put a question in the question box as we're going through, we'll do our best to see them and answer them. And then we'll finish up with some key takeaways and hopefully some priorities that you can use this year. So just starting off with kind of an overall summary. The title of our report for our survey results this year is Comfortable with Uncertainty. I think that kind of sums up where we're at as an industry and in the market. This certainly describes the situation that law firm leaders are in. You know, in an industry and a profession that's based on certainty. We've all had to kind of deal with uncertainty, not only in legal, but in all industries. And this has really been the top issue, I think, for law firm leaders. How do you keep the firm going, keep everybody engaged, and keep moving toward your strategic goals when the market's so uncertain? We thought we'd be in a better place at this point, and now with Omicron, things are still kind of uncertain. And so law firms are dealing with it. And I think the big theme for this year is just finding a way to be comfortable with that and sharing that with people in the firm. So that's the overall theme that we're seeing. Other than that, I'll just kind of highlight some of the big issues that we'll talk about in more detail. Obviously, the war for talent is the thing that is on the topics of everyone's minds. We saw a lot happen in the last year with salary increases, quite substantial salary increases across the board for associates as firms try to retain people and recruit people, not only associates, but partners. We've seen the highest attrition rates that we have in many years, about 21% on average across the industry last year, a little bit more in AmLaw 100 firms. Don't think that that's going to go anywhere, especially as firms continue to implement their return to work policies, some of which were delayed a bit at the start of the year because of the latest variant in the COVID-19. that also leads to the issue of the workplace. And what does the workplace look like going forward? It's a strategic concern for many, both in terms of the size of space, the type of space, and the impact of remote work. I think other than talent, the big issue of the year is the hybrid work environment. And how do we work to sustain that and make it work in the long term? And really the other thing that's on top of everyone's minds is culture. There's probably been more written about law firm culture in the last year than in the last 20. And we'll talk about what law firm leaders told us in response to the survey and some of the thoughts we have about what culture is and what it really means and how we should look at it this year. We've seen some challenges in the department and practice group leadership and management level. You know, a lot has really fallen on department chairs and practice group leaders through COVID as firm leaders are taking care of the overall firm policy issues and dealing with the changing environment every day with mandates and other requirements. So really managing the day-to-day has fallen, the brunt of that has fallen on department chairs and practice group leaders. And so we think there's going to be a lot of focus on that this year. We've seen a renewed focus on marketing and business development. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail, but after really an abysmal year in 2020 for marketing and business development, we've seen a lot of firms really put a lot of time and resources to invest in it in 2021, and we think that that's just going to continue. Succession planning continues to be an issue, probably more so now than ever, both in terms of leadership and client succession. Obviously, everyone working remotely increased the need for cybersecurity and innovation and delivering services to clients. And then what we'll talk about at the end is, are law firms really going to change? We'll tell you what our law firm leaders said were the challenges to that. And we think that's really the question that we all have to face. So like I said, we have a lot of information, and we'll start with the overall survey results and who our participants were, if we could advance to that. So we surveyed law firm leaders, and for us that meant law firm managing partners and C-level executives. You can see the breakdown of the participants in the survey. About 63% had a title of either managing partner, firm chair, or CEO. The category that you see as other are really COO, we're mostly COOs and some CFOs of law firms around the country. In terms of firm size, it really varied. We had a little bit from every group. We had some AmLaw 100 participation, and then the rest of the firms were kind of a mix between 151 to 300 lawyers, 50 to 150, and then 1 to 49. So where there are differences in the survey results based on size of the firm, we'll point that out to you, because there were differences in some areas. So moving ahead, I think the first thing that we asked about was strategic planning. Obviously, with so many things that have changed in the last 12 months, what have you done in terms of strategic planning? And I think this one was kind of a surprise for us, because about 45% of the survey respondents said that they had just continued on with their existing strategic plan, which is kind of interesting because the whole world has changed around us, basically. So it was interesting to us that that so many firms had indicated that they just kept plowing along with the strategic plan that they had. Some said that they had rethought their strategy, which we thought made sense. Some firms had started engaging in a whole new strategic planning effort last year, just recognizing the significant changes in the market and that they had to do something about that. And then there were some firms that said they had no strategic plan at all. And we think, even though things are still changing this year, I think firms are more accustomed to dealing with it, and I think they're going to have a little bit more space and a little bit more time to start thinking strategically again, and either start a new strategic planning effort or revisit the planning efforts that they've had underway already. I think it's important that they do. If they are really going to tackle the issue of talent strategy, I think they have to consider it on a strategic basis, consider what their opportunities for growth are, think about how they can be proactive and reactive, think about the impact of what remote work has had in terms of that talent and strategy. And we've talked a lot about compensation, but if you follow the Thomson State of the Market report that comes out about this time every year, I think they've indicated in that report, it's a great report if you don't typically read it, what we're seeing in that, compensation can do some, and it'll take you some of the way, but really when you get down to it, after compensation, people are moving because they've really rethought meaning and purpose in their lives since the pandemic, and they want to be part of an organization where they feel like they're part of something bigger and part of an organization that's moving there. And the way that you address that is through effective strategic planning. So we think strategy is going to be big in priority for law firms this year. Bill, you want to talk more about the war for talent?
Sure. I think the number one thing that that you and I have heard from most of the law firms in the past few months is there's a huge war on talent. I mean, there's not one law firm that we've had to come across asking us if we know of anybody, any laterals that may want to move, anybody that's interested in either being acquired or acquiring somebody. So you know, that's out there a lot, and I think that, you know, given the state that we're in now, it's really that's a big buzz that's going on. So let's talk about what we had in the survey. So here, what was the growth strategies for your firm right now? And the biggest answer that we got back was building on existing practice capabilities. So most people feel as though that, you know, their growth is basically, you know, building on what they already have, and that they have they have capacity in their firm to kind of grow. So there is that, and then on top of it, they're looking to add people to that as well. The interesting thing was that when we talked to the larger firms, the things that they said is their growth, their plan for growth was really by acquisition or bringing in lateral groups into their firm, right? For the mid to smaller firms, it was all about laterals and new hires. So there was a big difference between the two, right? The larger firms were trying to get through acquisition or bringing groups in, whereas the smaller ones were a little bit laterals and really grow from within. So we kind of thought that was quite interesting. And the one thing that they all kind of agreed in is that nobody really wanted to be the acquiree, right? That wasn't the plan for growth, so somebody to buy them. Okay. So next, Alex. So the impact on the remote work on growth strategy, as you can see here, most people felt as though there was really no impact on remote work, on their growth strategy as a result of remote work. Some felt as though that it allowed them to consider new hires. Others just thought that it allowed them to go into new markets, but that wasn't, there really wasn't a big impact as far as they were concerned. Next. The evolving workspace. So I can't tell you how many phone calls that we've taken on this as well. It gets kind of tricky with the law firm, depending on how long of a lease that they have left in their current lease, whether they have 3 years or more, 4 years or more, or somebody who is up for negotiation in the next 12 to 36 months. There's a bit of a different strategy, but the one thing that was pretty common, as you could see in the results, 45% said they were working on space redesign. 35% were considering, decreasing the foot space, and 30% of the firms already adopted to a change. So, some of the things that that we come across, obviously, a few months back, we had a designer. We had a small little webinar. We had a designer come in. She talked about the different things that law firms were thinking about, right? Obviously, smaller office sizes for partners, more collaboration space, bigger conference rooms, etc. I'm sure most of the people on this call, I'm not saying anything new that you aren't already considering, but that's what's out there right now. And so maybe this gives you comfort that how you were thinking is supports the route you're going, but clearly this was pretty consistent. Next. So again, nothing really different here. About a little over 37% said they've adopted their current offices to reflect their current space needs. Between 30 and 35% said they were considering a decreasing their office footprint. It's kind of like a repeat of what the previous slide said. So nothing new in this department. Next. Return to work. So now this is pretty interesting, because the one thing I think we could all agree on, and again, Marcy and I talked to a lot of different people, and the one thing that's pretty universal here is that, that the hybrid work environment is permanently here to stay, right? That the way everybody's working, where it's going to be some at work, some at home, there's going to be a certain level here that's not going away, that it's really a permanent thing. So now the question is like, depending on your type of practice, the culture of your place, or trying to keep the culture of your place, who comes back part-time, who comes back full-time. So it's kind of interesting as you see the results of what we've gotten here. Part-time, 25% of people said that the lawyers are back in the office part-time, and yet about 22% said they were back full-time. Now, when we took this survey, it was back in September, October. If we would take the survey today, I'm not sure what the results would be, right? Because, if you think about, especially for those of you that may be in let's say the New York City area, where people are maybe a little bit concerned about getting on public transportation, rates are up, people are worried about getting tested. There's all different things that are happening here. So this is going to evolve and continue to evolve. But I think the one thing we probably all agree upon is that there's going to be some hybrid here, and that's here to stay. Next. If your lawyers have returned, will they be returning part-time, or how many days a week? Most you see here, over 45% said they don't have any formal plan. There's no specific plan as to when. But the one common number of days that most people like their attorneys to be back in the office, as you can see here, was 3 days, right? So I don't think that's kind of unusual. I guess the question would be, depending on, how particular you want to be with monitoring the virus and your protocols, is how you want to space people out. Is there an A group? Is there a B group? Is that out the window? Or, are people vaccinated, not vaccinated? What's your protocols on that? So all this is kind of evolving a little bit too. But I think the one thing is that nobody really knows where this thing is leading. So I think it would be reasonable to say that people today really still don't have a specific plan. But I think most people, again, most of the managing partners that we talk to, the reason why they'd like to have their people back is because they're concerned about their culture, and they're concerned about keeping the culture of their firm and building collaboration, camaraderie, and things like that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Marcy.
I mean, we're going to talk about culture in a second. I mean, I guess I would just echo what you said. I mean, I think when we did the survey, I was kind of surprised that, at the time in the media, no one was really committing to what they were going to require in terms of return to work, or whether they were going to require specific days or not. And so I was shocked that a third of the people that responded to our survey said that they had committed to hybrid already in the fall. I think you're right. If we took the survey now, I think more firms have just come to the conclusion that they're going to be hybrid permanently. Only one MLA 100 so far has said they're going to be remote permanently, and I kind of was hopeful that there would be more that followed after that fell in line with the agreement to go to remote work permanently, but we haven't seen that happen yet. So I think it's an ever-changing thing, and I think with the workspace, wouldn't you say, Bill, most of the people we've talked to have decreased their office footprint in some way, and I think that we'll continue to see that happen as leases come up for renewal. I know that in that webinar that we did with Barbara Dunn from Gensler and Doug Simon from Tactics, they were talking about different approaches to design, but they were also talking about things that landlords were doing to try to entice law firms even before their leases were up for renewal to commit to something longer by giving them a lot of incentives and stuff. So I think there's a lot of that still going on. So in terms of firm culture, a few things. So we asked kind of about the typical things that we hear firms say that they're doing for culture. Are we having social events? Are we having virtual happy hours? Are we having all those? And most firms said that that's what they were doing to address culture. We've seen some firms we did a few in-person retreats last year. We did a few virtual retreats last year. What's going to happen this year in terms of law firm retreats, I'm just not sure. I know some firms that had them scheduled for January that have been canceled. So not sure about using retreats as a means of getting people together and try to keep the firm culture going. But I think what we're going to see this year is really people trying to get a deeper understanding of what culture is, and that it's not just, you know, that we have drinking parties together, that we bond in that way. I don't think people are going to accept the rote terms that people have used in the past. It's just accepting that we're collegial or we have camaraderie. I think we're going to have to go a little bit deeper, both in terms of DEI efforts, which we'll talk about in a second, and just in terms of what firm culture is. I mean, is it really about our pizza parties, or, you know, giving people free lunch to come back in the office? Or is it about, you know, do we create an environment where we could build safety to have real conversations, or share vulnerability about our concerns that we have about how our lives have changed and what that means to our work and what that means to our careers? Are we establishing some kind of purpose as a firm? Like I said, you know, although compensation is a motivator for a lot of people moving, what a lot of lawyers are saying in their exit interviews is that they want to be part of an organization that has meaning and purpose, and that is building something together. So I think we're going to take a different look at culture this year than we have in the past. At least that's my hope. I know some of the people that responded to the survey said that they were going to offer culture-based training programs. I know firms are doing cultural assessments to identify really what is the firm culture, because they think that they know, but they may not. So I think it's really positive, though. I think these are all discussions that we need to have. In terms of
the one thing I would add to that is, you know, the one thing that a lot of people talk about is the marketplace and how people are moving because they're getting offered more money to go to other firms and going back and forth, and so where there's a mass exodus to a firm because they're saying they're getting poached by other people. The thing I would tell you, that the one feedback that Marcy and I hear a lot about is, if you have a really strong firm culture, you know, sometimes those people don't take the headhunter calls. Well, they're not taking the calls. Like, the money isn't the difference. Like, if they're upset and they're unhappy, they take the call and they take the money because they don't like the situation they're in, and they said, you know what, I might as well be miserable someplace else making a lot more money, even though I know it's a short-term move. But, you know, so you have to ask yourself as a firm, you have to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, do I have a culture that allows exodus, or really, you know, helps, you know, fend off the headhunters that would call my people?
I think that's right. And I think what we're seeing is the firms that made investments in firm culture and had a really strong focus on that prior to the pandemic are reaping the rewards now. I think you're right. I think they're seeing less attrition than the firms that didn't pay attention or didn't address cultural issues, didn't address the 900-pound gorilla partners. I think they're reaping, the firms that focus on culture are reaping the benefits now. And I mean, there are associates and partners leaving everywhere, but I think firms that focused on culture before the pandemic are faring better than others. Okay, moving on to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously, that was something that really came into focus in 2020 after the George Floyd situation really prompted civil unrest and social justice activism. And so we saw a big increase, thankfully, in law firms in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and consistent with our survey responses. A huge portion of firms said that their focus on DEI had increased in the last 12 months. In September 2021, we saw 118 law firms announce for the first time that they had received Mansfield certification, which is terrific. And in order to achieve that, there's quite a significant commitment. You have to show that you affirmatively considered at least 30% women and unrepresented people for leadership and governance roles, equity partner promotions, formal client pitch opportunities, and senior lateral positions. So it's not just having a diversity statement, it's really doing something about it and showing that you have had results in that area, which, you know, is hard, especially for small and mid-sized firms to do. If you look at the next slide, we asked our participants what DEI efforts were underway at their firm, and, you know, as usual, most people are focusing on diversity in recruiting, but there's a lot more to it once you get diverse attorneys in the door. So we saw a lot of typical things: diversity committees, trying to improve retention, and a number of other things. I think that that this is something that's going to continue to be a focus, and it's really key to firm culture. And it's key to this talent strategy issue, because unfortunately, women and people of color have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, by all statistics that are out there. So I think it's going to remain a prominent concern this year and going forward. Changing topics to department and practice groups. This wasn't really a surprise. When we asked law firm leaders how their practice groups were doing, they said pretty much mostly or somewhat successful. But then when we asked an additional question about the leaders of practice groups, we got a bit of a different answer. If we can go to the next slide, you'll see that fewer than 20% of the respondents to the survey said that their department chairs and practice group leaders were mostly successful. That's not a good number. It's not inconsistent with what we hear, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, people who are promoted to these positions frequently have had no leadership development or management training programs, which is an issue. Often, even in larger firms, they don't have a specific position description. So they're given the role, but they don't know really what all of their responsibilities are and what they're going to be held accountable for. It's still true that in mid-sized and even larger firms, and especially in smaller firms, they're not getting paid to do this. There may be some nominal compensation or no specific compensation, but the compensation certainly for originating work and doing work is a lot more than they would receive for being the leader of the group. So it's a real challenge. If you want to fast forward to the next slide, we did ask.
One thing I'll add to that, Marcy, is you know, the easy thing in a lot of cases is let's give it to the best rainmaker in that group and make him or her the leader, right? And it's up to the managing partner and the other leadership of the firm to recognize that what makes that person a successful rainmaker doesn't necessarily means that person will be a successful leader. Okay, so that's a little bit of a trap door that a lot of firms fall into. So I just throw that out there because, again, the easiest thing to do is the most influential person obviously is the one who brings in most of the business, but they may be like either really lousy at managing and running a department, just like sometimes the best rainmakers don't make the best managing partners, right? For that same reason, you let them do what they do best. So I just want to make sure that that's out there and you place that in the back of your minds as well.
Well, and I think the opposite is true also. In some firms, they'll take the people who aren't the big productive rainmakers and don't have the busiest book of business, and they think they'll keep them busy by giving them a management role or an administrative role. And what I've seen and what I think you've seen is that, you know, the people who are the big business rainmakers and the most productive are typically the better leaders. So so that's an issue. And like I said in the beginning, as managing partners and governance committees and executive committees and management committees of law firms have been focused on just dealing with the day-to-day emergencies that have come up as the rules change all the time and they're losing people and you know, just putting the fires out. The day-to-day brunt of keeping the practices going, making the clients happy, making sure business development continues to happen, dealing with individual people issues as people have illnesses and are affected by COVID and all that really has fallen on the department chairs and practice group leaders. So it's been a lot for them. So definitely some area for focus and concentration this year. And we asked what are the main concerns for department and practice group, what are the main challenges for department and practice group leaders, rate the level of importance. If you want to go to the next slide, Alex. It's obviously the same thing. It's attracting and retaining talent, how to develop business, and how to continue to deliver services using technology in this new world in which we're operating. So let's talk about marketing and business development for a couple of minutes. Obviously, like I said, 2020 was pretty abysmal in marketing and business development. We saw, you know, business travel go to a stop, conferences and seminars canceled, you know, no one was getting on airplanes to meet clients in person. And so we saw dips in the investment in marketing and business development anywhere between 50 and 70% in 2020, based on how you looked at it, or which studies you were looking at. We've seen the numbers increase in 2021, not to pre-pandemic levels yet, but that certainly they've increased. Travel is still mixed. Some firms still have non-essential business travel policies in place, but we've really seen firms focus on marketing and business development more. If you go to the next slide, Alex, we can show them. Firms have started to rethink their brand strategy, started to put money into their websites again, realizing that was what they had to communicate with law firms now. Content strategy has been a big deal for 10 years at least, but we really saw lawyers take the time to start doing more podcasts, start doing more blogging, start doing more video, and really upping the content game quite a bit. So we think that marketing and business development is going to continue to be on the upswing this year. We're seeing firms invest more resources in it. We don't know if we'll get to the pre-pandemic spending levels as long as travel is being limited, but conferences are going on again. Seminars are happening again. Firms are starting to meet with their clients in person again. So we think that there will be more and more of a focus on that this year. The one thing in particular that we asked were whether firms were seeking feedback from their clients, and I was really surprised to see that 70% of the firms that responded to the survey didn't have a client feedback initiative at all. When you look at other industry data, usually it's 70% or more of firms with 250 lawyers or more have some sort of client feedback initiative in place. And in fact, 70% of the big firms have it in place. Many big firms have a full-time person dedicated just to client service and client experience. And many of the big firms have really gotten more sophisticated with it and considered client experience, not just client satisfaction, as we have for 20 years or more. So, if we can't get on airplanes and we can't go visit with clients, and at least we can interview them and survey them and talk with them and consider what their experience has been. BTI came out with their annual information this week, and they said that in 2020, the satisfaction numbers for clients with law firms went through the roof. I mean, law firms really did a wonderful job of going through extraordinary measures to make sure that their clients' work got done during the pandemic, and they really received kudos from their clients during that time for the way that they did that and how successful they were in that. But it's coming back down to pre-pandemic levels now, according to the BTI data. And so I just think it's a great idea for firms to actually speak to their clients in some formal way and find out how they're doing and how their clients are doing and what issues of concern are coming up for their clients. So, Bill, you want to talk about cybersecurity?
Sure. So, how would you rate your overall confidence in your firm's privacy data, cyber? A lot of firms were very confident, or really somewhat confident, which was really a nice thing to see. I know that the one thing that we've come across with a lot of firms, especially some larger firms, were a little bit surprising. There's a lot of migration going on to the cloud, and so you would think if they've kept their internal networks, there would be a big concern as cyber risk, etc. But most people really felt as though that they were in good hands. So that was good to see. Next. What percentage of your firm's major technology systems are cloud-based? As you can see here, a good chunk is 100% said we're 27, 28%, 75% of them 25 to 30%. So again, I think that everybody kind of understands the importance of what's going on here. So I don't need to add on to that. Next.
Well, can I just add, though, Bill? I think when we talk with our digital transformation team at Witham, what they tell us is that firms think that they're cloud-based, but they're not really truly cloud-based. They have their information sitting out on shared servers in different places. So I think some firms think that they're on the cloud, but they're they're not really, and that there really is a lot of opportunities for law firms here to fully migrate to the cloud. And definitely challenges with regard to privacy and confidentiality of information, but a lot of opportunity. And I think we're going to see more firms continue to do that this year, as we agreed that we're all going to be hybrid for quite some time.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that scares them a lot is, you know, again, the bigger the firm, the more data that has to be, you know, taking or sent to the cloud. So the migration, you know, the cost of all that data, you know, what law firm doesn't like to keep paperwork, right? And files and documents, right? So there's plenty of that. So that, you know, that in itself is a big cost. So, you know, this is, you know, with all the cost savings and the revenue that's being generated by a lot of these firms, this is the time to make the investment. That's what I would strongly suggest.
Yeah.
Next, you know, what's the strategy over the next 12 months? As you can see, again, cybersecurity is a high priority. Time and billing is there. Litigation management support, 60%, right? Medium priority. So, you know, you could see nothing is really the one thing that stands out here is, because of the environment we're in, cybersecurity is important, and innovation is extremely important, because the way you're going about doing business, the way you get your information out there, the way you bring information in, it's a whole new world. So you have to be on the cutting edge or create opportunity, because everything, the more information that you have at the fingertips that allows you to make decisions, real-time decisions, not reports that are a week old or a month old. You know, when you're closing your information out in order to have it within a day or two, 24 hours, that's important. Real-time stuff is where it's at.
And I think as we're seeing direct expenses keep being pushed higher and higher with attorney compensation numbers, firms are going to continue to try to find ways to have operational efficiencies, and innovation is one of those ways. So
okay,
I think it's on the agenda for this year.
So this is an area where I think is going to be really important for the next 5 to 7 years, given the aging population specifically within this group, and things that are happening out there, is succession planning. And so when we ask the question, how would you best describe the firm's current progress in leadership succession planning and implementation? You know, 55% says that, you know, they have a plan in progress, right? A small percent, 22%, 23% said they have a strategy, and about 21% that they don't. They're not even working on one. They haven't even started it. So, you know, I would say this: the ones that haven't started at it or don't think they need it, they may actually have a bigger cultural problem than they know. Okay, so that's just my 2 cents on that. I don't know what you think about that, Marcy, but that's.
I think that's right. I mean, I think you know, in the last recession, where I thought we were going to have a bunch of people start to retire, I think the last recession prolonged the period for retirement, and people stuck around a lot longer. And while we probably all would have thought maybe the pandemic would have accelerated people's wanting to retire, I think a lot of senior people in law firms figured out that they could do it from their beach houses in Florida or California, and keep going for even longer. So that makes it even harder for firms that don't have a formal succession plan to get them to transition their clients to the next generation of players.
Just remember, just because you want to keep productive people around longer doesn't mean that you can't transfer leadership responsibilities to a younger group. So if somebody maybe had thought that, hey, they want out at 70, 72, and they say, you know what, working with shorts and a golf shirt down in West Palm is not so bad. I could still do this. There's ways to compensate those people and keep them productive. But I think as far as the leadership of the firm and the way you want to keep this thing going on and on, there's got to be a plan in place, a succession plan in place to keep the thing rolling aboard. So.
Well, and if the next generation of partners don't think that they're ever going to have a chance at leadership or to have some control in the direction of the firm, then we're going to go back to the war for talent issues again.
Correct. Next slide, Alex. Okay, so our firm gives younger, a lot of it, you know, about 77% said their firm gives younger partners opportunities to serve in key leadership roles. That's the one thing that I think that we're noticing, that a lot of the firms are really trying, those people that are talented, that they want to keep. Again, because we're, you know, go back to the war on talent. Those firms that are really good recognize that in order to keep that talent, they have to put these people in positions of strength to kind of move up, so that they're, you know, they're on a subcommittee, they're part of the leadership group. There's an opportunity to be on some sort of, you know, executive committee of some sort. So I think that this is kind of spot on with, you know, with the numbers that we see. And again, they also use, you know, they reward their leaders for their contributions in leadership positions. Obviously, the more responsibilities you take on, there's some sort of reward involved, or else who wants the job, right? So I think that most of these responses here are kind of in line with what we would have expected. There's really no surprises here. Next. How would you best describe your firm's current progress in the succession planning? Well, here we go. We've got a little over 33% that say they have one in progress. 31% have nothing going on, and about 28% said, you know, they're working on figuring out how to put a plan together. Okay, I think that most of the firms here could do a better job at that, and I think that they can send a message to the talented people that are coming up that there's a plan, so that again they don't get that call that says, do you want to bail ship, jump ship, because you can't see the plan. So I think that that's extremely important. Again, I think this is going to be something that's going to be growing and becoming more and more and more important, over the next 5 to 7 years. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about some KPIs. So the good news is that 75% of the respondents said the rate per lawyer is going to increase. That's pretty good, right? 83% said that they believe profits per partner are going to increase. 78% said the overhead was going to decline or stay the same. Now that one is kind of tricky, in that I think during the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of overhead that was reduced because it just had to be reduced, right? Some of it had, as much as, reducing marketing costs, or reducing travel, entertainment, other things like that. But I think what happened is people had a hard look as to, they had employees that were there for a long time, and what do these people do? They're important, they have to be here, and if they're not in the office and they're not working with people, and you kind of realize that they're not as important. So I think headcount was kind of really reduced. A lot more people, more efficiencies picked up there. Reductions of leased equipment, another thing that kind of went down. And I think what's interesting is, over 93% said billable hours increased or stayed the same, which is not surprising, right? Because if people found themselves at home, they wanted to do something, they weren't traveling, they weren't on a train, they weren't in transit to someplace. So there was a lot less wasted space, right? And I think that those that typically would go out at a BD function found themselves probably hunkering down and doing some more billable work. Next. Not surprising here, right? Looking at moderate increases in revenue per lawyer, profits per lawyer, overhead per lawyer, is down. Utilization, billable hours, moderate increase. Realization, moderate increase. I would think that for most firms, there was a lot of good numbers when it came to revenues and profitability, and so this survey reflects that. Next. What's the outlook for the next 12 months, right? Anybody surprised here? Moderate, everybody believes in a moderate increase on all these things, that there's going to be continued revenue growth, profit growth, utilization, realization. There's not, the overhead one is kind of, is somewhat of an outlier in that they stayed the same, because again, if you're in a lease and you're in, your rent, you're locked in. There's not a lot of savings unless you sublease or something else goes on. Some law firms actually, their thought is, hey, I have this much space. I actually could shrink my space. So I have two options. I could either try to sublease it, or I could try to grow it and bring in more attorneys. So not a bad thought there as well. Next. What percentage of your firm's engagements are based on alternative fee arrangements? Anybody surprised at this one? 0 to 10%, well over 50%. Say that
these numbers really haven't changed significantly in a very long time.
Yeah,
so.
It's kind of boring. It's kind of boring actually, but it is what it is. And you know what? When we talk about innovation, maybe this is an area of innovation that somebody comes up with, in an alternative way. But the marketplace fixed that. As long as you're seeing price, rate increases and work out there, there's no need right now. And if there's a shortage of talent, you're not going to give away your work, right? So next. Over the next 12 months, what changes do you anticipate in your hourly billing rates? Is anybody really surprised at the rate increases here? Although I will say that what are we looking at? A 1 to 5% increase, pretty much, is the most sought out one there. 6 to 10 comes next. There were a few that came in at over 10%. So, I'm not quite sure what the reason was for that, but I think it could be, demand, supply and demand.
And I thought this was the one headline that came out of the financial section of the survey, just because, 1 to 5% increases are pretty typical, but there were firms that were pushing 6 to 10% increases, 10% or more. And we've heard anecdotally from talking to clients of law firms that they had law firms, asking for upwards of 20% increases. And they're saying, but look, we know your overhead has gone down the last couple of years. We know you're decreasing your office space. We know your direct expense, your expenses are going down. What's the reason for this? And obviously the big driver is associate compensation and lawyer compensation is going up, and they're trying to recoup that somehow. But I mean, I thought it was, I thought that was a big headline. And when we don't have this slides today, but if you have an interest based on firm size, we're happy to send you the class tabulations of the survey that we did by firm size. But this was across the board. Obviously, the bigger firms, those top two categories we had from the beginning, the over 300 and that 151 to 300, push the envelope in terms of increases more so than the small and mid-sized firms. But across the board, from the smallest of firms to the largest of firms, said that they were really pushing their rate increases this year. So that was really happening in the fall. If you haven't, adjusted your rates yet for 2022, I think if there's a time that you can be a little more aggressive with it, it's this year, because your competitors are.
I think the associates increase kind of stands out. And what is that? I think that's part of in order to keep that talent and to pay them, to keep them, that's why their rates went up, in order to make, they're paying them a lot more money. And, and some clients won't pay for first or second year associates, so they have to make it up somehow. Right. So that was all the good news. So let's just a little bit about the bad news.
Well, I mean, the bad news is things are so good. How are you ever, as a law firm leader, going to get your lawyers to change? How are you going to get people to do things differently? And that's really the question that everyone is struggling with. The world is different. We need different strategic approaches to deal with the market the way it is right now. And how do we change? And our law firm leaders told us in response to the survey that their biggest challenge is complacency among complacency caused by the firm's financial success and a lack of motivation for partners to change. You know, if people are doing well, how are you going to get them to do things differently than they were before? And pretty much everyone in the legal industry is doing well. I mean, the third most important was the lack of clarity on how to change, and we can certainly help with thinking through the how, but it's you know, how do you get people to buy in? And so that's the big struggle. So we wanted to take a break here to answer any questions that you may have. I saw one question in the group, in the question box, was how big do you think a firm should be before it formally structures practice groups? I mean, we work with firms, I've worked with firms as small as 10 or 12 lawyers that have practice groups. I mean, are they as detailed or as organized or as efficient as firms, as practice groups in big firms? Not necessarily, but if you have people in working teams, they're kind of de facto practice groups. And so how big do you have to be before you formally have a structure or have practice group leaders? I mean, I think it's never too soon to start, provided that you're going to give the practice group leaders clear direction about what their jobs are, what they're supposed to do. You're going to acknowledge in their compensation that they're taking the time to do this. You're going to give them training that they need to be a leader or to manage people if they haven't done that before. So we've seen smaller firms do it, and I think it's never soon enough, is my personal opinion. I don't know if you have anything different to say about that, Bill.
No, I'm in line with you on that.
Do we have any other questions from the audience, Alex, that I may have missed?
Yeah, there's one, you know, asking to speak about the impact of staff in firms that are remote or hybrid. Have they simultaneously experienced staffing cutbacks as attorneys have shifted to more remote work?
That's interesting. We have a colleague that does a lot of work in this area, and firms are really rethinking staffing ratios, how paraprofessionals and how legal assistants are utilized, what they're utilized for. So we think this is, you know, that's another big consideration. So yes, there have been some reductions. We think that there will be going forward once we know what it's going to, once we know what the structure and the systems are going to look like going forward. I don't think we've seen any mass layoffs or any changes like that, but I think firms are really considering how they're structured, how they're staffed, and how can they gain efficiencies in this hybrid environment. I think the whole consideration of the hybrid environment, what it means, how it works, how to keep people engaged, along with the war for talent, are the two main things that we'll be talking about this year. Any other questions?
Yes, we just had another one come in asking, have firms made a shift to outsourcing legal assistants and paralegals?
To some extent, we haven't seen any major shifts in that area, but to the extent that they're being more flexible with hiring staff remotely, it is kind of de facto outsourcing, right? Where firms are being more open to hire not only lawyers but staff, regardless of where they are based on geography. It is outsourcing to an extent. I mean, are they opening operations in Knoxville, Tennessee for all their secretaries? I mean, there were some firms that were doing things like that, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. But I think we're going to see, I think everything's going to be on the table at this point. And
I think there's more there, like on the admin side, there's a lot more pooling of people, you know, you know, whereas there might have been, you know, pre-pandemic, you might have had an administrative pool of maybe 10 to 15 people. I'll just make up a number. Whereas now you may say, hey, you know what, we might have 8 now, and that 8 is going to take care of a pool of people, as opposed to, you know, you 3 take care of this, you know, that partner or that partner, you know, it's kind of like a pooling type of thing to reduce overhead.
I think that's right. Alex, I'm having a hard time seeing any new questions coming in. So if there are anything else, just let us know.
Yeah, another one came in or, some people are asking about the, how comprehensive the survey, the reach of the participants, which I know in the beginning we had the slides on the different sizing and yeah, the sizes of the firms that participated. So
this, yeah, we had a pretty interesting mix. We had some firms with 300 or more, but most of the participants were in the 151 to 300 lawyer range, the 51 to 150, and the 1 to 49 range. And geographically, they were all over the country, probably a little bit more of a concentration in the Northeast because that's where our firm's headquarters is located, but we have clients all over the country and we have offices all over the country. So we did, we had even a Hawaiian firm respond. So that it was pretty geographically diverse and pretty diverse in terms of firm size.
Great, yeah, and also someone's asking, is this something that the firms can participate in?
We would love if you participate in the survey. And so we're going to be doing the survey again next year, but if you would like to submit your response, we're happy to go over your results with you. I mean, that's one of the things that we offered the participants in the survey, and we spoke with many of the participants in the survey afterwards and kind of had a more qualitative discussion about their responses and what they mean. So if you're interested in participating, it's technically too late for last year, but you can go through the questions and we can sit and go through them with you. We're happy to hop on a Zoom call with you for an hour to do that and just talk about how your firm fares compared to the participants that did respond. But we'll be doing one again next fall.
Yeah, great. That's the last question that's come in. So, as we speak. Oh no, never mind. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. All right. If you don't mind forwarding it to the last slide, we'll just go through kind of a wrap up and talk about our next webinar. There you go. So, we'll end as we started. I think comfortable with uncertainty is the theme, and how are law firm leaders going to be comfortable themselves with this market that just keeps changing and, generate a sense of comfort among their firms, no matter what the size, as we continue to do this time of uncertainty. I think it's going to be super important to create a sense of urgency. I think even though we're still having different variants and different waves and different phases of problems and changes in travel and pushback of return to work, I think we're kind of used to that now. And I think for most firms have systems in place for dealing with that. And by and large, they've done a great job. So I think now it's time to rethink where we are, who we want to be, and what our strategy is going forward. So I think the challenge for firms is going to be, when everything is so good, how do we create a sense of urgency in our partners so that we can take a look at our strategy? I think firms are going to be revising their overall firm strategy. I think practice group leaders and department chairs are going to be asked to rethink their strategy for a changed industry. As we've said ad nauseum, I think we're going to be talking about talent for better or worse for at least the next year. I think firms are really going to have to think of culture not in terms of our collegiality and the parties and the ways we get together in social ways, and kind of the surface level ways that we've looked at culture, and really make a commitment to take a rigorous approach to analyzing and understanding our firm culture and what makes us tick, and what it is, and where the deficiencies are, and what we want it to be. So I think that'll be a big theme this year. I think we're going to see firms making investments in leadership, in development and management. Again, refocusing on marketing and business development, putting more dollars into that this year, and continuing their commitment to DEI, and looking at the client experience and how clients work with the firm in this new hybrid world. I think we're going to still see a focus on cybersecurity as we stay in the hybrid environment. And as Bill talked about quite a bit, succession planning is going to be high on the list. So times are good, but there's a lot of work to be done. Wouldn't you say, Bill?
I would. And for those of you who are on the call, we appreciate you taking your time out of your day to follow up on this. Feel free to reach out to Marcia and I. We'd be more than happy to help you with any one of your issues, or at least if you just want to have a phone conversation, we'd be happy to do that as well.
And a big thank you to everyone who participated in the survey. We really, really appreciate it. The information is super valuable, and we're happy to share it with everyone today. And given that talent is the biggest issue, our next webinar is going to be on talent on February 16th at 2 p.m. We have a special guest speaker, Michael Ellenhorn from Decipher. If you don't know who Decipher is, you should check it out. They do due diligence mostly for lateral hiring. As firms are making investments in laterals, it's cost so much to recruit them and so much to retain lawyers. And his team has a really unique service offering. And as part of their work, they've developed some interesting data on what works and what doesn't work in lateral hiring. And he's got some great things to say and interesting things that might surprise you. So we're looking forward to that February 16th at 2 p.m. with Michael Ellenhorn from Decipher. If you want to put our contact information up there, we are welcome to take any questions or talk about anything that we didn't get to today. Anything else, Bill?
Nope, that's it. Again, thanks everyone. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to be with us.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you guys for joining us today. We'll be sending up a follow-up email with the PowerPoint presentation and webinar recording. Please take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and thanks again, and have a great day. Bye.